Om Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyau Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantif Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantir Me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra Sukhina Santu, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukha Bhag Bhavet, Sarvastaratu Durgani, Sarvo Bhadrani Pashyatu, Sarvas Sadbuddhimapnotu, Sarvas Sarvatra Nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts.
Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amrutam Gamaya. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. We begin today on verse number 23. Let us chant the verse together. Gata sangasya muktasya jnana vasthita chetasaha yajnaya acharatah karma samagram praviliyate. He who is devoid of attachment, free, whose mind is established in knowledge, and who does work as a sacrifice for the Lord, his entire action melts away. In the last few verses that we have been studying, beginning with how the ideal is to see action where there is really action, and inaction where there is really inaction. In other words, our present personality with body, mind, and spirit, there are aspects of our personality which are active, and they are always active. They cannot not be active. And that's the body and mind, the material part of our personality. The spirit within us, that's beyond action. That it can never do anything. It doesn't need to do anything. So right now, as we are a combination of a part of us which is eternally at rest and a part of us which is eternally active. Because we are identified with that part which is active, our identity with the body and mind, which is what gives us the identity, I'm a human being. This is me, this is my body. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. So this idea that I am working, I'm doing work, is because I'm identified with that part of my personality which is active. But there is another part of my personality which is always at rest. And many of us don't even know it's there. Some of us who kind of know have kind of an intellectual idea about it. But once we are able to see that
I should not neglect that part of my being which is always at rest. Then we become aware of it, we start thinking about it more and more. And the more our awareness dwells on that part which is eternally at rest, the less we will be identified with that part which is active. Now the question, of course, is why should we not be identified with that part which is active? And the reason is our present experience of life is kind of good, but not really all that great. It leaves much to be desired. That there is things which bring fulfillment, but never total fulfillment. That there are things which bring us satisfaction, but never complete satisfaction. And of course, the ever-present experience of stress, anxiety, worry, fear. All of this happens because we are identified with that active part of our being. So what Krishna is pointing out here is, if I can now get identified with the non-active part, my problem will be solved. And we might say, well, am I not then simply substituting one identification by another identification? No. Well, yes and no. Yes, because it seems like we are substituting one for the other. But the advantage in identifying with the spirit is that we are the spirit. The disadvantage in identifying with the body and mind is that we are not really the body and mind. So if I identify myself with something which I am not, it's not going to be particularly happy experience if that which is not perfect. This is getting, sometimes when I start speaking, it just gets too abstract at times. So let me put it this way. Let's say that you are an actor. And in real life, you are a very happy, contented person. No worries. Just imagine. Now, you are acting in a play, and you have the role of a person who is angry, who is frustrated, who is always fearful, a person who is living virtually in hell. But that's just only a role that you're playing. You're not that. You are really great. But that's the role you are playing. And so when you have to go and act clearly, if you are a good actor, then you will be completely immersed in that role. While you are on the stage, if you're on a Broadway or off Broadway, wherever you are, on the stage, you will be so immersed in the role, you will kind of take on the identity of that character which has all these negativities. But once the play is over, you go, you wipe off your makeup, you go home, you are your contented self again. Now, in this particular example, this temporary identity with what I am really not is not really a happy experience, although it's just a job because I'm getting paid for it, I enjoy acting, I do it, but I want to go back to being who I truly am, a happy, contented person. Now, what if I get into my role, the play begins, and the play is supposed to end after an hour and a half or so, and just doesn't end. The play goes on and on and on. And I get so immersed into that play that I even forget. I just feel like, well, this is life. Then it's not going to be happy. Because in reality, I'm a very happy, contented person, but I'm playing the role of a terrible person, and this play is not ending. That's our situation right now. In reality, we are all spirit. We are perfect, infinite, always free. No problem. Satchit Ananda. Great. But now we are acting into this play. If you want to give it a name, like call it samsara or something like that. So we are acting in this play. If it were just a short time, short duration, it's great. Just some change. But this play somehow doesn't seem to end. And after some time, it's it's getting on our nerves. It's like, wait a minute, isn't there any way out? Am I just kind of stuck in this? And what happens really? Suppose, think about it this way. If some actor is really sick of acting, I've been acting like for 50 years, 60 years, and I'm just sick of going every day and acting. Now, if this person complains, he's like, I'm just sick of it, and then this person, do I really have to do it? What would an actor have to do? Well, say, I'm not going to act anymore. That's it. I just walk out. And I become my old self again. Now, that is what Krishna is telling us in the Gita. We can walk out. We don't have to remain mortal, weak, vulnerable human beings, suffering with stress, anxiety, worry, fear of our mortality, and then not being happy at all. It's not, if we were happy in school, we don't have to worry about it. But we are not happy. And we complain, we grumble, we seek help. We say, what am I going to do? Just walk out. You don't have to keep on acting. And so we just wipe up. Now the makeup, of course, if you're an actor, you just wash it off. And that's a little bit easier. Right now, our washing off would say, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm not the ego. And if I can, not just saying it verbally, really look within and say, this is not who I am. Once my body identity, mind identity, ego identity is washed off, what remains is the spirit. And then I can be always at rest. Now this might seem like, oh, that's really asking too much. Now what the last few verses that we have studied says that even if we start thinking about it now, however imperfectly, we may not succeed fully, however imperfectly, we will already begin to experience some rest. Even when I'm busy, even if I'm filled with worry and anxiety, a part of me remind myself, I'm really the spirit. This is just a drama. Let me try to step back. So, experiencing rest in the midst of intense activity. And even when I'm completely at rest, I can look at the body and mind and say, they can still be active. So being at rest doesn't mean you stop doing whatever you're doing. It doesn't mean not carrying out your duties and responsibilities. You carry out your duties and responsibilities as best you can. But deep down you know, I'm spirit, I'm at rest. If I'm able to do it, then my work becomes non-work. Now what does work becoming non-work mean? Simply that right now my work produces results and I am bound by the result. By bound is meant, if it is successful, I am happy. If it is not successful, I am miserable. So my life is nothing but alternately experiencing happiness sometime, misery sometimes. I'm just caught up in this cycle of success, failure, joy, sorrow. The only way to get out of this is to make my work non-work. And the work becomes non-work by identifying with the spirit. That is what is meant. The verse that we read just now, you see the end phrase is, the entire action melts away. That means that action at present, the work that we do leaves a residue in terms of results and how they affect us. If they melt away, they leave no residue. Now, what are the things that we need to do in order for us to, this kind of sounds great, be identified with spirit and the problem is solved. But what do I really need to do in order to remove this false attachment, to remove this, to stop being an actor and going back to being who I really am? And verses 19 through 22, the 4 verses that we saw earlier, I just shortlisted. There are at least 7 practices we can all try to do. They are all interconnected. They are not completely separate. But if you want to list them, first is try to minimize your attachments in life. As I said, we are attached to a million things. And it's good to start minimizing it. Because at least some of our attachments may seem to bring joy. Clearly, if you're attached to chocolate ice cream and you like chocolate ice cream, that attachment is kind of wonderful. You say, oh, I don't want to give up that attachment. But there are some other attachments in life which don't particularly bring us joy. They oftentimes just bring us pain, and it seems pointless to be attached to it. So those are the attachments you must try to say, I must get rid of it. There are some attachments which are kind of a gamble, in the sense that sometimes they make you happy, sometimes they make you miserable. Attachment to your favorite team, for instance, if you're attached to Red Sox, when your team wins, it makes you happy. When your team loses miserably, it makes you painful. So that attachment sometimes makes you happy, sometimes makes you miserable. And that's your call. If you say, well, I don't mind getting miserable, but I don't want to give up the joy, well, stick on to it. So in this way, first look at all the attachments, and the easiest to get rid of are the attachments which bring only pain. And slowly, through your own experience, you will realize that fewer the attachments, greater the joy. If attachment to ice cream brings me joy, because I love ice cream, then that attachment can also bring me pain if I just have one piece left in front of me, and I know if I finish it, there's not going to be one immediately. So really speaking, there isn't really no attachment which can bring only joy. It's just not theoretically possible, and practically as well. Anyway, so that's one thing. So first thing we can practice is minimize our attachment. Second, practice of contentment. The words that is used in the Gita, I'm just quoting from the earlier 4 verses that we have already studied, 19 through 22. The word used is tripta or santushta. A sense of contentment. Yeah, life is not perfect. It's sure that none of us can say, I have everything that I wanted. But even then, whatever it is that we already have, can we look upon it with some sense of contentment? Otherwise, our whole life can spell in just being miserable. If we just look at what I don't have, what I lack, then I won't be able to enjoy or be happy with what I have. So where do I want to look? Do I want to look at, well, to put it in a kind of a cliche-ridden language, do I want to look at the glass which is full or a glass which is half? Again, it's a choice. But if I want to live with contentment, one will also try to maintain a positive mental attitude. There was a book had come way back in the 70s. It was titled Success Through Positive Mental Attitude. And what it said is this, that before beginning any activity, before beginning your day, before you begin the major part of your work, if you're in a positive frame of mind, that doesn't guarantee success, but the probability of you doing well that day in your work increases if you begin the work with a positive attitude. If you begin the work with, say, great, it's a great day, nice weather, and even if it's a nice weather, I'm in good mood, and I'm going to do it well today. Begin with that, and you will see you will do better than, oh my God, I'm never going to finish it. This is miserable. I just hate this. If you begin with that, the chances of you not doing well and not enjoying are this is just through experience. So if you are interested, it's an old book, Success Through Positive Mental Attitude. And it was not just about spirituality. It just said even in our day-to-day secular lives also, having a positive attitude is very helpful. And of course, much more so in spiritual life. When you pray or meditate, it's like, oh, another chore, I've got to meditate. I know nothing is going to happen, but still I'm going to meditate. Now, before beginning your meditation or your prayer, if you sit with that hope, today, through God's grace, I will put my whole mind into my spiritual ideal, and something wonderful will happen. So with the example that Sri Ramakrishna gives is that if you're interested in fishing, and if you go fishing and you take your fishing rod and go to the river or the ocean, you should always be ready, be hopeful that any moment the fish may come, and you should be ready. Exactly in the same way, when we pray, when we meditate, it's not like every few minutes you open one eye and look at the clock and see where you need to go. It's like, be ready, because God's grace can come any moment. And if we are not alert, if we are not waiting for it, if we are not expecting it, it may come and go and we won't even know. So although it is said that knock and it'll be opened, and sometimes we just say that I'm the one who is going to do knocking and the Lord will open, it's more helpful to look at it the other way. It's the Lord who is knocking. And if I'm not alert, if I'm not hopeful, if I'm not positive, I won't open the door. If I'm just drowsy, or if I'm meditating and supposedly meditating and just thinking, oh, I've now got to finish this work and I've got to do that, I've got to do that, then even when the Lord comes and knocks, I won't even hear it, because I'm hearing my own thoughts at the time. So that's what is meant by being vigilant. And so that comes through contentment. So practice of contentment is very important. Third, minimize your desires. This again we saw last time. Nirashir, that's the word used in the Gita. 4, the word used was yata chittatma, self-restraint. It calls for an inner discipline. Discipline in the work that we do, discipline in our personal habits, in everything. So, and again, it's not a rule imposed by anyone outside. That's always, that never really works that well. But can I look at my own life, take responsibility and say, these are the kind of habits I'm going to develop. These are the kind of habits I need to give up because they are not helping me. So inner discipline is what yata chittatma means. Aparigraha, non-ownership. We saw this also, that the less we own things, the happier we become. Again, that doesn't mean just give away everything. Even when Jesus said, sell all that thou hast and follow me. And there have been people, St. Francis of Assisi, for instance, he took it very literally. Literally give everything and give. And that's wonderful. If we can do it, that's great. But what's also important to remember is that it's possible to apparently give away something physically and yet retain its ownership. I'll give you an example. Sometimes some people say, give something to a church or a temple or a synagogue. Give it, say, oh, here is something I would like to donate, and give it. And say some, just any object, anything. And that's wonderful. That's a good act. Giving it to a holy place as an offering, that's great. But, and say, just as an example, say, let's, well, whatever, say, a table or a chair is given. Now, it's given, right? And so that table or chair is kept in some place, prominent place, where you get to see it every time you visit the church. And so every time you pass by, you kind of say, oh, that's the one I gave. That's one. And then maybe after 5 years, you go with a bunch of friends and family, and then you're saying, oh, that's the table I gave. So really, I mean, physically you have given, but you are still retained ownership of that. You see, so it's not just about not keeping things physically near. So where the thing itself is, the location of the object is completely immaterial. So the sense of ownership is a mental construct. And it's not just things, it's also people. So we own the family, we own our children, we own our parents. So So ownership is a much, much bigger thing. Now, a spiritual way of looking at all of these things is that I don't own anybody. Nobody owns me, and I don't own anybody. But that doesn't mean you just give up everything and go to a forest. No. What it means is this: of course, be with your family, be with your friends, that's great. Be with your community, that's great. But you don't own them and they don't owe you. Then how do we look upon people, those whom we see as our own? We see them as those who have been brought in our life through God's grace. That's how a devotee of God sees. They are brought in my life, they are God's gift to me. And if I love God, that's what a devotee by definition is someone who loves the spiritual ideal, loves the divine, loves God. So if it is something that God has given me for taking care of it, so it still belongs to God. Well, everything belongs to God. Even we don't belong to ourselves. What to speak about anybody other than us? But God has given them in my care. So if I take good care of the people and things that have been entrusted to my care, I can do that out of love for God. So it's possible to carry out even what we see as our family responsibilities or worldly responsibilities, as secular responsibilities. All of these things can be seen as a worship of God, because God has put me in this situation. Let me do it the best, carry out my duties, my responsibilities in the best way possible, because doing this is doing God's work. You can already see, it's very subtle, but if you don't own anything, and you don't become an object owned by anybody either. I mean, we all want, everybody says, freedom. But we are not often willing to extend that freedom to others. So when I own something, when I own especially people, then I'm actually restricting their freedom. Just as if someone were to say they own me, my freedom would be restricted. So just as we cherish our own freedom, we must respect the freedom of others as well. And that becomes possible when you say, nobody owns me, I don't own anybody. And I will take good care of people, my family, my friends, my community, my colleagues at work, whoever. Or just a stranger or a neighbor. Love thy neighbor as thyself. You don't own your neighbor, but you can still love. In fact, and this is very important, we can truly love that which we don't own. Because if you own somebody, then it is like, oh, it's my duty to do it. Oh, it's my responsibility to do it. But love is given completely in freedom. It's not bound by any expectations. And therefore, non-ownership is a great spiritual practice. Again, all this is completely internal. You don't have to go and tell anybody, I don't own you or you don't own me. Most people won't even understand what's going on. So, but again, it's completely internal. And you will see, these are the ways we are able to manifest our true free nature. Because these are the ways our freedom is compromised by all this sense of ownership, this attachment. All these compromise our personal freedom. Next, we have seen a titiksha, forbearance. With all the ups and downs in life, if they disturb my composure, if I'm affected by all the ups and downs in life, both ups as well as downs, then I'm never going to be at peace. At the physical level, there's going to be the extreme heat of summer and the extreme cold of winter. But even at the psychological, there will be extreme joy at some time, extreme terrible sorrow at the other. Now, all these pairs of opposites, if I can hold on to that sweet middle place where Yeah, sure, success will make me happy or failure will make me sad, but I'm still in control of myself. So, if I can live without complaint, without any anger, without any retaliation, but just contented within myself, then I will be able to identify with that spirit within me. And finally, vimatsaraha, freedom from jealousy. That's among the negative traits that can take away our peace of mind. Jealousy is pretty much high on the list. Envy, jealousy, all of that. So these are the 7 things. And as I said, they are not completely independent of each other. They are connected. But verses 19 through 22 mention these 7 practices, which would be helpful for us to assert our freedom, experience that deep peace, and not be affected by the downside of intense activity. We can be more active than we are now, and simultaneously experience deeper peace and contentment if we try to cultivate these 7 things. 1, minimizing attachment. 2, living with contentment. 3, minimizing our desires. 4, life of self-discipline. 5, practicing non-ownership. 6, forbearance. 7, freedom from jealousy. And that's what brings us to the verse that we read just now. He who is devoid of attachment, free, whose mind is established in knowledge that I am the Spirit, and who does work as a sacrifice for the Lord, his entire action melts away. So the word for the sacrifice of the Lord is called yajna. We referred to it earlier in chapter 3, what yajna means. We saw the yajna is a kind of a cyclical activity, how everything happens in nature. If you don't remember it, just look up the chapter 3 that we saw before. And so this idea of yajna will come again and again in the Gita. Yajna comes from the Sanskrit root yaj, which also means to worship. So doing yajna means doing everything as a worship of the divine. In ritually speaking, yajna in the older Vedic period, they didn't have any image. Image worship came much later, historically. And ironically, image worship was not a part of the Hindu tradition. Among the greatest reformers in the Hindu tradition was Buddha himself. Buddha was not a Buddhist, by the way. I'm sure you know that. So he was a Hindu reformer, and Buddha saw, when Buddha came, as with every tradition, over time, things get diluted. Over time, the main focus gets lost. Over time, the majority of the people then start taking detours. That's what had happened during Buddha's time. He saw that people had gotten so much immersed in rituals, and the spirit of the ritual was lost. Now, rituals are great. They're very helpful, provided they're done. Every ritual is an external activity, but every external activity also has a corresponding internal component. And we have seen that on earlier occasions. Even a social ritual, saying something, good morning. I mean, that's a social ritual. You meet somebody and say good morning, because that's an activity. You're saying something. Now, every time you say good morning, internally, are you also feeling, I truly hope and pray you have a good morning? So with that thought, with that good wish, then you say good morning, then that good morning is a good morning. Otherwise, it's just a mechanical thing, like, how are you? Good morning, thank you. I mean, we say thank you all the time. Again, thank you is a social ritual expressing gratitude. Now, gratitude is something that is expressed inwardly and externally through these 2 words, thank you or thanks. Now, if that external ritual, thank you, is accompanied by a true sense of gratitude internally, then that ritual is great. But without that, it's mechanical. Now, in Buddha's time, he saw all the religious rituals. The externals were fine. The internals had dried up. And then he said, stop all this. It's pointless. Don't say thank you. If you're not really feeling grateful, don't say it. That's hypocrisy. That's lying. So he went against all rituals. And he said all these, they had during Vedic periods, all these gods, this Indra, Varuna, all the personified forces of nature were called devas. And so they offered in the worship that was prevalent in those days, there used to be a fire, and either through ghee with a big spoon, a wooden spoon oftentimes, they will take ghee and say, offer it to this, I offer it to this deity, or offer it to that deity. And Buddha said, stop all that. Because the ritual itself is great, but the inner component of it is completely lacking. It's become completely mechanical. So you're doing something and thinking you are being very religious, but it's nothing. And so stop it. That was a great teaching. It was very much needed for the time. But people being people, we often, and that's the, and I think all these great saints and prophets are fully aware of it, that how many will really practice what even an incarnation or prophet comes and teaches? That's the thing. So the first thing, they were great, of course. Buddha's time, people were inspired and they did wonderful things. So some great upheaval did take place. But alongside, there were also people who did not really fully understand what he was saying. And so the first thing they did after Buddha's passing, made Buddha a deity. So the first image that was made ever was of Buddha's image. And then, of course, once this trend is set, and then, of course, you had images of Krishna, Rama, and then you had lots of images. And so that's how image worship started. Now, yajna is so I said yajna is a form of worship of the Lord. So ritual is great. So we have a daily worship here at the Vedanta Center as well. Now, a worship is great. It's a ritual. We oftentimes, and there is not just one fixed way of doing it. There are many different ways. The way we do it in the Vedanta Center is often takes the form of offering sandal paste, flowers, incense, waving of lights, and offering foods and sweet. Each of these things, these are external, physical, material things. Now, each of these things also has an internal component. When these things are done, accompanied by the internal right way of looking and offering, it's extremely powerful. It's extremely helpful. It's extremely transformative. It's a great, great, great practice. Now, if it's done without that, without the accompanying thing, it's just like with just another job, another chore to be completed, then it's not helpful. And so when this verse says, doing work as a sacrifice for the Lord, what it means is that it's possible that every work that we do, that can be also done as a worship of God. If I do that work as a worship of God, then again, that work, entire action melts away. So the question here is this. Everyone works. People who are enlightened work, and people who are not enlightened work. Now, people who are not enlightened work, and if they want to be free from the negative aspects of work, they have to practice all the things that we just now saw. And then work becomes non-work. So you are continuing to work. No one stops working, but that work doesn't bind you anymore. Now, what is it that would make an enlightened being work? I mean, if someone is enlightened, if I know that was all spirit, body and mind really not, they're just shadows, and I'm the spirit, why would I want to do any work? What is the need for me to do any work? And that is what is pointed out here. For an enlightened being, everything becomes as a form of worship. So, what is the natural characteristic of an enlightened being becomes a practice for the rest of us. So this becomes one more discipline. Everything that I do in life, can I do it as an act of worship? So worship inside the temple, the worship can be done with flowers and incense. But outside the temple, the worship can be done in other ways. When the deity is sitting on an altar, then you do a ritualistic worship. But if God is present everywhere and in everyone, God can come to us in many different forms. So as a teacher, God comes to me in the form of students. So when I'm teaching, and if a part of me keeps that awareness that the divine is filled everywhere, the divine is present in the form of my students. So when I teach my students, I'm really worshiping the divine. There, your incense won't do, flowers won't do. So for a teacher, giving knowledge, teaching is a form of worship. If you're a physician, as a doctor, the patients who come to you, God has chosen to come to you in the form of a patient. When you are driving, and if a homeless person comes to you, you have the freedom to say, well, God today has chosen to come to me in the form of a homeless person. Don't give any flowers. Don't take out your incense and doing it. No, that form of worship, God in that form will not accept that worship. If you have a quarter or a dollar, give it. Well, that would be the ingredient of that worship. Any person in need comes to you. Any person who needs help, and you have the capacity to help, then that help that you give is the worship, because that person who has come to you is really divine in that form. So that is what is meant here. Who does work as a sacrifice for the Lord, his entire action melts away. So it's possible to do all the work that we do, provided it is good work, it doesn't violate ethics and morality. It's possible to do it out of love for God. There is a very tiny little book, some of you may have seen it. It's called Practicing the Presence of God. Practice of the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence. Great book. It's very tiny. It's very old. So if you get a chance, it should be available in any library or anywhere. Try to read it. It's deceptively simple. When you read it, it's very positive. You almost feel like, wow, it's so easy. I can straight away begin to feel the presence of God everywhere, which is good. Only when we actually start practicing it, we see that it's challenging. It's not impossible, but it's not as easy as we think either. But we can begin. Think about it this way. It's not too difficult to see God in the people we love and like. That's relatively easy. But trying to see the presence of God in people whom we don't like, people who are terrible, that's difficult. But that's the practice. Well, easy is easy. You like someone, you say, oh, I see God in you, which is fine. But if I'm able to see the presence of God, now, again, just because I see God in everybody doesn't mean that I have to relate to everybody in the same way. So, Sri Ramakrishna used to again say, his examples are so clear. He says, there is God present even in a lion and tiger. You don't go and hug a lion and tiger. Oh, there's a Lord in you. Come on. You're obviously not. But that doesn't mean the Lord is not present in them. So we deal with everyone appropriately, but recognizing that even in the people whom we intensely dislike, or people who could be dangerous, even then in them, God is still present. I should take all care to protect myself from a God who in a terrible form. But still, again, that one story, many of you may be familiar in Ramakrishna's teachings, about a student, a Vedanta student. His teacher told him, God is present in everyone. And the teacher, the word that gets used in that story was Narayana. Narayana is one way the divine is referred to. Narayana is present in everyone. God is present in everyone. And all the students learned it, and one of the students was very moved by that teaching. He said, that's great, really, God is present in everyone. And then when he was returning home, and these are the olden days, and this was somewhere in India because there was a mad elephant let loose. And the mahout, the one who sits atop the elephant and is supposed to take care of it, was not able to control that elephant. So something has gone really wrong. And so the elephant man, the person who was sitting on top of the elephant, he was shouting from above, get out of the way, get out of the way, this elephant is coming. And of course, people, they saw, and everybody got it. It's just like you hear 911 and an ambulance or cop's car go, everyone kind of makes way for them. It's like that. So this elephant, and everyone got out of the way. This Vedanta student who had heard God is present in everybody, he just looked at people running here and there and said, how foolish these people are. Don't they know it's all divine everywhere, God in everyone? There's no need to run. There's God present in this elephant as well. And so he just goes and stands in the middle of the road and says, oh Lord, how wonderful you are. And of course, then the elephant came and just kind of took him in his trunk and threw him off somewhere. And this fellow goes and falls somewhere and is terribly wounded and hurt. And people are thinking, like, is he crazy or what? And then the news goes to his other fellow students, and they all run there, and the teacher goes there and said, what happened? Didn't you hear everyone shouting there, get out of the way, get out of the way? Why didn't you do it? And then the student says, oh, teacher, but you said God is present in everyone. And I thought, well, God is present in the elephant as well, and why should I go? And then the teacher said, yes, it's true. It's true that God is present in that elephant. But what about that person sitting on top of the elephant who was telling you to get out of the way? God is present even in the people who were telling you to get out of the way. Why did you listen to this elephant God and not these other gods who were telling you where to go? So, meaning that divine is present everywhere, it doesn't mean being stupid. So understand the teachings well. Because not only will it hurt you, it will also bring bad name to Vedanta. I'm more I'm more worried about the latter. So understand the teaching properly. That's very important. So let me read this verse one again before I close. He who is devoid of attachment, free, whose mind is established in knowledge, and who does work as a sacrifice for the Lord, his entire action melts away. And what the next few verses will do, which we will see next week, is show the different ways we can worship the Lord. How it's possible to do everything as yajna. And those will be the set of verses which we'll take up next week, next Wednesday. But before we close, you have any thoughts or ideas or questions? Yeah, welcome. We have 3 or 4 minutes before we finish. Yeah.
Maharaj, I'm just going back to the 7 discipline you gave us. So it reminds me the story of another from Ramakrishna, that nanny. She practiced every bit of that.
Yep.
Because she was ownership, there was no ownership. There's no desire. Forbearance was there. So all the 7 was...
I think that's very good. Yeah, you remember the story about a nanny who is working in a wealthy man's house, who lives and does everything there, looking upon it as my house, the children of the owner as my children, and takes care of them as one would take of one's own children. keep the house clean as one would one's own home. But deep down, you know, this is not really me. I'm only employed here, and anytime I can be asked to go away. So, yeah, that's a very good example. It really has almost all of these qualities necessary. And in some ways, look at it this way. We don't really belong here in this world, so to speak. The song, Narendranath, as Vivekananda, as a young man, was a very good singer. And when his first meeting with Ramakrishna, they asked him to sing. And he sings that beautiful Bengali song, which says, "Oh mind, go back to your own abode, go back to your own home. This is not really your place. You're only passing by." It's like, think about it this way, in a way, isn't it? Suppose when you go on a vacation, say, it's to Hawaii or Bahamas or wherever you go. Well, you go, when your vacation starts, you go there, and then when your vacation is about to end, you come away. You are not a resident of Bahamas or Hawaii, you're just only visiting it. Why do we think we are residents here? We are visiting it. Well, our vacation started when we were born. Our vacation will end when we die. So why do we think that we belong here? So we are as much passing by here as when we go on a vacation. At least the vacation we go, at least we know how long we are going. This particular passing by, we don't even know. So keeping that in mind helps us put our life, our responsibilities, and a larger canvas of existence. It helps us to put things in a better perspective. When we suddenly discover that we have invested so much into something, and sometimes it can happen. For instance, very, very briefly, time is up, but very briefly. I think I don't need to hunt for any other example. Just the example that I had mentioned, I think, a week or two ago, about the pet library. Remember that? So when you borrow a cat or a dog from the library, and it's going to be there with you for a month, an intelligent child who brings that will, of course, should take good care of that cat or dog for a month. But also, I think, if I'm also keep that in mind, that after a month, this cat has to go. I will be better prepared for the day when I have to return that pet. But if I'm not thought about that possibility at all, I'll be devastated. And so that's why we need to live with foresight and farsight. Look a little bit ahead of us. If we have, we, in general, all sane people, make good plans for the future, recognizing, well, life is uncertain, so I must have some plan. And we all kind of plan in our own way. What plan do we have for the time when we die? We may plan for our retirement, we may plan for our old age, we can plan with our medical insurance and a place to stay and all of that. That's great and that's important and that's wonderful. But do we have any plan at all about what to do when we die? Because among all the uncertainties of life, there is if there is one thing that is certain, that if I'm born, I'm going to die one day. I don't want that day to be soon, but it's going to come. While a lot of other contingencies we plan for in life perhaps may never happen. But this is something that's going to happen. So if I have planned for many of the uncertainties of life, have I any plan for this one certainty of life? So that is where spirituality comes in. we can, I think, take good care of this world. And many of us are very smart, very intelligent. We can deal with it better than then we really don't need the Gita too much for it. But the real test is this. What about what happens afterwards? It's very easy to say, well, I don't care whatever happens. Even a person who says that, deep down, doesn't really mean it. And so, this is foresight or farsight would mean, let me also plan for that one eventuality whenever it happens. And that is where it takes us back to the spirit. That is where it shows us the way. So we will continue the discussion. As you can see, even when it begins with just the notion of work, the deeper we look into it, it takes us inward. It takes us inward. And it helps us look at life in a much, much larger canvas. We don't have to become like ant. I mean, it is said, I don't know the exact one, but when a little ant walking, crawling along I mean, how far can an ant see? I don't know, but maybe a few feet, maybe a few inches. But we do better than ants, clearly. I mean, even with eyes, we see visibility, how much our eyes can see. But our mind can see much further than what our eyes can see. And so we just have to see how far ahead of my own existence I'm willing to see and start preparing for it now. That's the thing. Om Jananim Saratam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhu. We bow down to Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother again and again. On this Sunday, we have a guest speaker, Swami Nikhilatmanandaji, who is a senior monk of the Ramakrishna order. He's visiting from India, and he's an expert on the Ramayana. So I've requested him to speak to us next Sunday on the story of Hanuman, which is one of the very important character sketches that we find in the story of Ramayana. So I would encourage you to come on Sunday to hear Swami Nikhilatmananda, who will also give 2 talks in the city in Hindi on topics related to Ramayana, Tulsi Ramayana. You'll find the details on the board outside. The Saturday evening and Sunday afternoon. Saturday evening at 7 o'clock and Sunday afternoon at 2:30. These 2 talks will take place at the Sai Baba temple in Billerica. The address is also there on the board outside. And those of you who get the email notifications, updates, these details I will see that they are included in the email update that you will get this week. So you are welcome for this program. Next Wednesday, we will continue with the study of the Gita as usual. So Saturday, because of the talk at Billerica, we will not have the Arati and meditation this Saturday. But next Tuesday, the Arati meditation will be held as usual. So we'll conclude with a prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the all-living being become manifest unto us. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May the divine bless us all and fill our hearts with infinite grace and love. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.